Hello everyone, I'm Dovlet. Today I'll be teaching you some effective speaking techniques. Before we get started, if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe to our channel. So let's get started. So in this video, I will be teaching you the elements of voice control, physical presence, and effective speaking preparations. You need to know these because these skills are crucial to being a confident and successful leader, not only in school but also in a work environment. So these are a very important life skill for you to have. Okay, so now let's get into the first teaching point. I'll be explaining some elements of voice control. Voice control is very important to effective communication, and we will be talking about 6 points. And these are the 6. So let's get into the first one, which is speed. Now, I don't think I really need to explain what speed is, but the official definition is the rate of which words are spoken. If you get this right, you can ensure the audience can understand every word that you're talking about. You need to make sure you're not speaking too fast or the audience wouldn't know what you're saying, but you also need to make sure you're not saying too slowly, because if you're saying too slowly, your audience will be bored and they won't be paying attention to your presentation. Next up is pause. Pause is basically taking breaks in your speaking. You need to give some time for your audience to digest. So you don't want to just keep talking and rambling without any pauses in between. You want to take some pauses and give your audience some time to digest what you just said. It's also very effective for changing subjects. So, for example, when I'm changing teaching points, I will be stopping for a couple of seconds for you to digest the information. Next up is articulation. Articulation is the clear and distinct pronunciation of a word. These ensure the audience can understand the message, and also if you are not pronouncing the words correctly, you might want to just change the wording because you want to be pronouncing words that you actually understand and know. Next up is pitch. Pitch is the high and low of a voice, and these, while they don't change the meaning of the message, they do keep people involved and is very important, and it ties in very closely with the next one, which is quality of a sound, and these give emphasis to words and convey emotion. What that basically means is that you have to sound happy when you're talking about something happy, and you have to sound a lot more serious when you're talking about something very serious. And these two things, pitch and tone, they, when combined, has a term for it, which is called monotone. Monotone is basically when you don't change your pitch or tone, and this is one of the easiest beginner's mistake for effective speaking, because when you are very nervous, you're more prone to doing a monotone presentation, and that is extremely dangerous because a monotone presentation is extremely boring and no one will like it. So you need to make sure you are constantly changing your pitch so that your audience does not get bored out of their minds. And finally is volume. Volume is the power of a voice. You need to give emphasis to a point while you want to say that point louder. And also when you are presenting in a different environment, you might need to take into account some environmental factors, such as when you're teaching in a small room, you might not need to be speaking as loudly as when you are talking in a very open area. And that is teaching point 1. Hopefully you understood all the elements of voice control. Now it's time to move on to teaching point 2, which is discussing the elements of physical presence. Now, I don't know if you know this, but 93% of meaning actually comes from non-verbal communications, and only 7% of them come from the words themselves. That is a big reason why virtual learning is so hard, because you're literally only getting 7% of the meaning. So it's pretty hard to learn with only 7% of the meaning. So in this teaching point, we'll be talking about 7 points. For this slide, we'll be having 3, and the rest are in the next slide. The first one is facial expressions. Most nonverbal communications is communicated by the eyes, eyebrows, and mouth. You need to make sure your facial expressions match the tone of the message. So when you're talking about something very serious, you want to make sure you're not grinning. You're not expressing any happy emotions when you're talking about something really sad, like a fatal accident. But when other situations, when the mood is pretty neutral or happy, you want to make sure you are like smiling and looking happy. And smiling in most scenarios are very important because it adds sincerity into the message, and it also makes the mood more relaxed. It makes the audience feel more at home, and that's just overall a good thing to have. Second thing is gesture. Gestures are the combination of hand, arm, and shoulder movements. You can make a variety of gestures that can give emphasis to an emotion to a message. But make sure when you do these, you do not overdo them. When you overdo them, you just make that as a joke. Like it looks like a joke, and you don't want your gestures, like your good intended gestures, to look like a joke. And also, you shouldn't point at anyone unless you're trying to get them to answer questions, because that might be interpreted as a rude gesture. Thirdly is eye contact. Eye contact is a very effective way to engage the audience and build some interest. And when you're giving eye contact, make sure if it's a small audience, you want to look at every single person actually in the eye. Not just like vaguely look at their direction, actually look them in the eye. And if it's a larger audience, just look, scan left to right, back to front. Make sure you at least are looking at every single group of people. And do not like miss, maybe like you're only looking at the left section of the room and not the right. If you do that, the right section will feel very alienated, and they won't pay as much attention. Now let's talk about the rest of these teaching points. Body language is the process of communicating through conscious and unconscious gestures and expressions. Now this is kind of gestures is part of the body language, but this is basically affects how the message is received and interpreted. If you want to have good body language, you want to, when you're presenting, you want to be standing up straight, and you want to look overall very confident, and you know what you're talking about. If you look like you don't know what you're talking about, no one's gonna listen to you. Next up is movement. Movement keeps the listeners engaged and interested in what's being said. Make sure when I don't know if you have seen this, but like in TED Talks, the speech, the person talking always walks around the room in a very normal way. They won't run, they won't be like tiptoeing, but they will move around the room in a very natural way. And that's exactly what you should do, because when you are moving around the room, your audience will have to look at you while you move, and that will keep them more engaged instead of just looking at a person just standing in the middle of the stage. However, when you're moving, make sure you're not moving too much or frantically, because if you're talking about something very serious and the audience is just looking at you and you're just running on the stage or you're just tiptoeing on the stage, that's extremely distracting and affects the message very much. And the last 2 points are very closely connected. Firstly, dress. You might not understand what this means, but dress is basically your attire. You want to make sure your attire is clean, is well pressed. That means like ironed out and like just looks good, and appropriate attire. So when you're doing a presentation to, let's just say, some investors, you want to make sure you actually look good. You are wearing the appropriate attire, maybe a suit and a tie, and you're wearing actually good shoes, not some like random sandals. And that, if you can wear everything correctly, you can look professional, you look confident. It can help create confidence and credibility in you, and therefore your audience will be more inclined to listen more keenly to what you're talking about. And lastly, deportment. Deportment is you need to be prepared for what you're talking about. You need to be on time, don't be late, because no one likes anyone that comes in late. You need to be appropriately dressed, as previously mentioned. And oh my gosh, the most important part is confidence. Because if you're not confident, nothing you can do about like the first couple of points that we've been talking about. You can't make a lot of eye contact, you will just be looking at your notes all the time. You can't make normal gestures, you can't make natural movements, and your pitch and tone will be very monotone. And that's why confidence, in my opinion, is the most important aspect of deportment. Lastly, let's talk about effective speaking preparation. When you're preparing for effective speaking, you should be preparing for these 3 things. Firstly, practice. You want to be rehearsing the content that you will be talking about, because this will give you more confidence and you will be able to do more eye contact with the audience and just perform in a more natural way in general. And when you're practicing, focus on the introduction and the conclusion. Well, why those two parts, you may ask? Well, firstly, introduction can draw in the interest of the audience and hopefully keep them for the duration of the presentation. And a good conclusion can leave a lasting impression for the audience, and they will be more inclined to maybe visit your content more, or just think about what you're talking about longer. Not just right after your presentation is over, they'll just stop thinking about it. And finally, when you're practicing alone, you still want to be speaking aloud. And also, if you will be presenting while standing up, you want to be practicing standing up and speaking as loudly as you want to be actually doing the presentation. Because if you are, you will be able to get into the flow of actually doing it as if it's actually the real thing. You can actually get into more of the flow and you can perform better at the actual presentation. Next up is control nervousness. Of course, everyone feels nervous, but we need to learn how to control it, because without an uncontrollable nervousness will drop your performance. So we have these 5 things to get better at the controlling nervousness. Firstly, room layout. Room layout basically means that you need to be familiar with the layout of the room that you're presenting at. It might not be a room, it might be like outdoors, but like, okay, that is a terminology. Basically is like the arena that you are doing the speech at. You want to make sure you're familiar with the layout so that you won't miss anyone. You can actually do eye contact in a more natural way. The second thing is materials. If you are going to be giving out notes or handouts, you want to make sure those are available. And if you need any presentational aids like a projector or anything, you want to make sure those are also present. Thirdly is practice. As we previously mentioned, practicing is everything. You want to make sure you are practicing well, you have everything down and you're ready to do the presentation prior to doing it. Fourthly is attitude. You want to enter the room with a smile and a positive and confident attitude. Even if you had a bad day at school or a bad day at work, you need to make sure you don't bring those emotions to the presentation, because you don't want to bring down everyone with you. And lastly, breathing. If you're very nervous, take a deep breath before entering the room. And you might want to slow down the delivery if necessary. Because in my experience, when you are nervous, you'll start to speak a lot quicker and you will start to breathe a lot quicker like this. So you want to slow down the delivery and breathe from the diaphragm, because that can help you breathe in deeper and breathe in slower to slow down everything. To make sure get back into the flow and not rush everything. And lastly, you want to identify a friendly face. Making eye contact with a friendly face will give you some confidence and hopefully makes the presentation go a lot better than normal. And that is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you found this helpful in any way, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. And also feel free to comment down below what other topics do you want me to cover. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.